Hello, my name is John. I always had an innate curiosity, the kind that pushed me beyond the boundaries of the world most people dared to stay within. Even from a young age, I was the one who led the charge into the unknown, whether it was exploring the thick woods behind my house or finding old, abandoned buildings to scale. It wasn't just the thrill of the climb. It was the sense of conquering something forgotten by time, the feeling of touching the past with my own hands. That was the magic of it all, the sense of adventure. I'd say I was fearless, but I suppose all adventurers are, at least until something happens to remind them of their mortality. The day I climbed that old building with my friends was no different. The structure was crumbling, its once grand exterior now covered in ivy and age. But to me, it was just another challenge, another mountain waiting to be conquered. We were a group of boys, laughing and daring each other to go higher, to see more, to push our limits further. I remember the adrenaline pumping through me as I ascended, feeling the rough stone under my fingers and the wind in my face. Each step, each handhold, was a victory, and I was determined to reach the top. But as I neared the pinnacle, something went wrong. I didn't notice the loose brick, or maybe it had been there all along. The next thing I knew, my foot slipped. I tried to catch myself, my arms flailing in the air, but it was too late. Gravity took hold, and I fell. I remember the sickening thud of my body hitting the ground, the world spinning around me, and then nothing. At first, there was only darkness, the kind of darkness that wraps itself around you, swallowing up every trace of sound and light. But it wasn't the cold, empty void I had expected. No, this darkness was different. It wasn't frightening. I didn't feel alone or abandoned. It was as if something was waiting for me, something I couldn't quite grasp. There was a stillness, a quiet, that seemed to stretch beyond time itself. And then, slowly, something changed. It began as a soft glow, a gentle light that grew brighter and warmer as I became aware of it. It wasn't like any light I had seen before, not from the sun, not from a candle, not from a lamp. This light was pure, almost alive, and it didn't hurt my eyes. It embraced me, wrapping me in a sense of peace and tranquility that I had never known. It was soothing, like stepping into a warm bath on a cold day, like breathing the freshest air after being trapped in a suffocating room. I felt my fear and pain vanish as the light surrounded me, and for the first time, I understood what it meant to be completely at ease. The surroundings began to form, though they were unlike anything I could have imagined. The air smelled sweet, like something from a dream. The light was everywhere, yet it wasn't blinding. There were no sharp edges, no harsh angles, just a gentle flow of warmth and calm. It was as if I had been transported to a place that didn't obey the rules of the world I had known, a place that felt timeless, eternal. In this strange, serene environment, I wasn't alone. A presence appeared before me, though not in the way I would have expected. It wasn't like meeting a person in the traditional sense, yet I could feel it. This was a being of immense power and compassion, someone who seemed to radiate an understanding beyond anything I could comprehend. There was a familiarity in the air, something that made my heart swell with recognition, even though I didn't know how or why. And then I heard a voice. It wasn't spoken in words, not exactly. It was more of a knowing, a deep understanding that pierced through my soul. The voice was warm and loving, and I felt a sense of relief, as if I were finally home. "You have been chosen, John," it said. "There is a purpose to your life, a message you must carry." I couldn't explain it, But I knew in that moment that this voice, this presence, was not just any being. It was something divine, something far beyond human comprehension. It was Jesus. He didn't say it outright, but I knew. The peace I felt, the overwhelming sense of love and acceptance, it was unmistakable. It was the kind of peace that could only come from something truly holy, something that transcended everything I had ever known. It was in that moment, as I stood between the peace and the strange light, that I began to see the world in a completely different way. That's when I realized that life is not just about personal choices, but a shared journey, where each decision can lead us to a profound change. I've always thought of myself as someone who could see the world in clear terms. Good, bad, right, wrong, black, white. But when I had that vision, when I saw the world laid bare before me, everything changed. It was as though the veil that had separated me from understanding was lifted, and I saw not just the world I knew, but also the deeper truths beneath the surface. It wasn't a dream, not exactly. It was more like a moment out of time, where the boundaries of reality seemed to bend and stretch, and I was shown something much larger, much more profound. What I saw, I still struggle to fully comprehend. But one thing is certain: the world is at a crossroads, a place where both joy and division coexist. And what we choose to do with that will determine everything. It started unexpectedly. I was sitting on the porch, staring out over the city, lost in the usual quiet of the late afternoon. The sun was beginning to dip behind the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape. Everything seemed normal, but then, in an instant, I felt it. An overwhelming sense of peace, followed by a rush of clarity that made the world seem so much sharper, so much more vivid. The colors around me intensified, the sounds of the wind and distant voices took on a new meaning. And then, the vision began. It came like a flood, slowly at first, then all at once. I saw the world, but not as I knew it. I saw people from every corner of the earth, men and women, old and young, standing at what appeared to be a great divide, each one facing a choice. On one side, there was light. It wasn't just light, though. It was a presence, a warmth, a sense of hope and love that seemed to call out to everyone. The people standing in that light radiated peace, joy, and a deep connection to something beyond themselves. But on the other side, there was darkness. It wasn't the kind of darkness you might imagine. There were no shadows or scary monsters lurking in the corners. It was more subtle, more insidious. It was a coldness, a feeling of isolation, of confusion, of disconnection. I could see the people standing in that darkness, and their faces were filled with doubt, anger, and fear. The divide between the two was stark, and yet they were so close to each other, so close that I could feel the tension in the air. I watched as some of the people on the side of light reached out to those on the side of darkness, trying to pull them into the warmth, to offer them the same peace and joy they had found. But many of those in the darkness refused to look, refused to listen. They were lost in their own pain, their own suffering, their own stubbornness. Others, though, seemed to hesitate, torn between the two, unsure of which way to go. And in that moment, I realized something profound. It wasn't the divide that kept them apart. It was their own hearts, their own choices, and the forces that shaped their lives. They had been given the gift of choice, and yet so many of them didn't understand the power they held within them. It was then that I felt his presence. Jesus. He stood beside me, though I hadn't seen him approach. I didn't need to see him to know who he was. There was a sense of familiarity, of comfort that washed over me the moment he came into my awareness. He was quiet at first, watching the vision unfold before us. There was no urgency in his posture, no anger, no frustration, just patience, as though he had seen this countless times before. After a moment, he spoke. "John," he said, his voice calm and steady, "the world is at a crossroads. It has been for a long time, but now the choice is clearer than ever. What you see is the consequence of the choices made by each person, by each heart. There is joy, yes, but there is also division. And it is up to you, up to all of you, to decide which path you will walk." I didn't know how to respond, but I had so many questions. How could people stand in that darkness? Why didn't they see the light? Why did some reach for it, and others turn away? Jesus seemed to read my mind. Or perhaps he didn't need to hear the questions. He simply continued. "Faith, John, is the key," he said, his eyes meeting mine with a depth of understanding that felt like it pierced right through me. "It is not enough to see the light. You must walk toward it. And those who are lost in darkness, they must find the courage to step forward, to trust in something greater than themselves. It is not an easy thing. The world is filled with noise, with distractions, with fear. It is easy to lose your way, to believe that there is no hope, no way out. But faith, true faith, is the anchor. It is the light that guides you through the storm." I listened, trying to absorb his words, but they seemed too vast, too overwhelming. How could someone like me, someone who had struggled with doubt and confusion, ever find that kind of faith? How could anyone in the midst of so much pain and suffering believe in something they couldn't see, something they couldn't touch? The questions piled up in my mind, but Jesus continued to speak, as though he knew every thought I had. "Vigilance, John," he said, "is just as important as faith. You cannot sit idly by and expect the world to change on its own. You must be aware of the choices you make, of the way you live your life. Your actions matter. Your words matter. Every small step toward the light is one more person choosing to walk in faith, choosing to make a difference." I felt the weight of his words sink deep into my chest, a burden and a blessing all at once. I had never thought of my life as having such purpose, such significance. It was easy to get caught up in the day-to-day struggles, to get lost in the noise of the world. But here, in this vision, I could see the broader picture. I could see the potential for change, for healing, for a world where joy and peace could triumph over division and despair. And it was in that moment, as I began to understand more about the divisions in this world, that an unexpected connection emerged in my mind, leading me to a new experience where thoughts about the world and its leaders became more complex than ever before. I never thought I would find myself thinking about someone like Donald Trump in a way that felt profound. But that's exactly what happened. I wasn't expecting it, not in the least. It all started one evening as I sat alone in my room, the usual quiet of the night settling over me. I had been wrestling with a lot of thoughts, feeling disconnected from the world around me. There seemed to be so much division, so much chaos everywhere I looked. The news was filled with the usual noise, people fighting over politics, over beliefs, over the future. It felt like the world was splintering apart, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were all just watching as things fell further into disarray. Then it happened. It started like a flicker, a brief moment of something outside the realm of my ordinary perception. At first, I thought I was just tired. Maybe it was the stress of the day catching up with me. But the sensation grew stronger, pulling me deeper into something I can only describe as a vision. Suddenly, I wasn't in my room anymore. I was somewhere else entirely. It felt like time had slowed down, or maybe even stopped. The air was thick with the sense of something important, something massive unfolding right before me. And there he was, Donald Trump. It wasn't a typical image of him, not the one you see on TV or in the headlines. No, this was different. This was more profound, more layered than I had ever seen him before. I saw him standing at a crossroads, much like the rest of us, but there was something undeniably significant about his position. It wasn't just that he had been a former president. It was something deeper, something about his role in the grand scheme of things, something that connected him to a much larger narrative. As I watched, the vision expanded. I saw him not just as the man he is in the world, but as a figure standing at the helm of something much bigger. The world, it seemed, was waiting on him. The weight of the future hung in the air, and for a moment, I felt this intense pressure coming from the very core of the vision itself. I didn't understand it fully at first, but then, in an instant, a voice spoke, calm, steady, yet filled with undeniable authority. It was Jesus. I didn't need to see him physically. I could feel his presence, like a warm light surrounding me. His words, however, were clear. "John," he said, and his voice resonated within me. "The world you see is in turmoil. People are divided, lost, and confused. It is easy to point fingers, to blame others, but you must understand that those who lead, who hold power, play a pivotal role in shaping the future. Donald Trump, like others before him, will play a crucial part in the course of events that follow. But remember this: those who lead must also be held accountable. The choices made by those in power ripple across the world, affecting countless lives. It is not enough to sit idly by, to simply watch. You and all others must hold them to the truth. But even in that sorrow, there was a glimmer of hope. I saw people rising up, not in anger, but in faith and determination. I saw people coming together, holding their leaders accountable, not through violence or hatred, but through a call for justice, a demand for truth. I saw communities coming together, united by a common purpose, seeking peace even in the face of adversity. And I realized that we, as individuals, have the power to shape the future, just as much as those in power. It's not just about waiting for the right person to lead us. It's about holding those in power accountable and making sure that the future we create is one where justice, love, and integrity prevail. Jesus' voice echoed in my mind again, this time more urgent, more intense. Do not be passive, John. Do not allow your world to slip into complacency. Do not let leaders, whether they be your president or your local officials, escape scrutiny. Faith is not a passive belief. It is a call to action. It is the responsibility of every person, every believer, to stand up for what is right, to speak truth to power, and to ensure that those who govern do so with the well-being of all in mind. I felt a rush of clarity flood through me. It wasn't just about politics or specific individuals. It was about the greater responsibility we all share in shaping the world. Leaders are chosen, yes, but their influence can only be fully realized if we, the people, remain vigilant. We are not meant to simply follow. We are meant to question, to challenge, and to ensure that those who lead us are held to the highest standards. And in that moment, as I was immersed in thoughts about the responsibility of leaders, a shift in my perception led me to a deeper vision, a warning about what we might face if we remain oblivious to the division and darkness that are enveloping our world. There are moments in life that shake you to the core, moments when you see the world in a way that changes everything. I had one of those moments, one that I still can't fully explain, but that I know deep down is a truth I have to carry with me. It wasn't a dream, not in the usual sense. It was something more, a vision that I couldn't shake, no matter how hard I tried. It started on an ordinary day, like any other, when I was just going about my routine. But suddenly, it was like everything around me started to feel heavier. The air felt thick, charged with a kind of tension that I couldn't put my finger on. And then, it hit me. A vision, a glimpse into something dark, something troubling. I was pulled out of my own reality and thrust into something else, somewhere else. It wasn't a place I recognized, but it felt all too familiar. It was like I was looking at the world, but not as it is now. This was a vision of the future, a glimpse into what might happen if we kept going down the path we were on. The first thing I noticed was the darkness. It wasn't the kind of darkness you might imagine, like the black of night. This darkness was different. It was like a thick fog, creeping slowly across the land, choking out the light. It started small, barely noticeable, but as I looked around, I saw it growing. Fear, distrust, and division seemed to be feeding it, each one adding more weight, more suffocating pressure to the world. People were isolated, separated from one another, trapped in their own bubbles of fear and suspicion. The vision showed me how those divisions had taken root, how fear of the other, fear of the unknown, had created walls between us. I could feel it. The tension was palpable, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to snap. There were groups of people standing on opposite sides, staring at each other with eyes full of anger, confusion, and mistrust. It wasn't just political, it was deeper than that. It was cultural, personal, emotional. Everyone seemed so sure that their side was right, so convinced that the other side was the enemy, that they couldn't see the common ground between them. The more I watched, the more I saw how the darkness grew, how it spread, how it consumed every corner of society. It wasn't just external, it was internal too. People were losing themselves in the fear, the anger, the division. It was like the darkness was creeping into their hearts, turning them against one another. But even in that overwhelming darkness, there was something else, a flicker of light. It was faint at first, barely visible against the blackness that surrounded it. But it was there. It was the light of unity, of hope, of love. It was like a spark in the middle of a storm, something so small, yet so powerful. As I watched, I saw people, individuals, groups, reaching out to one another. They didn't all look the same, they didn't think the same way, but they shared something deeper. They saw beyond the divisions, beyond the fear, beyond the anger. They saw each other as human, as brothers and sisters. And as they reached out, that flicker of light grew. It was slow at first, but as more people came together, as more people chose unity over division, the light began to push back the darkness. I could see it in their faces. People of all backgrounds, all walks of life, coming together to create something better. It wasn't easy. It wasn't without struggle. But there was power in that unity, a power that the darkness couldn't extinguish. It wasn't just about coming together physically, it was about coming together in spirit, in heart. The vision showed me that unity wasn't just the absence of division, it was the active choice to stand together, to support one another, to love one another, despite the fear that tried to tear us apart. I don't know how long the vision lasted, but it felt like an eternity. It felt like I was seeing the fate of the world unfold before me in real time. The vision wasn't just a warning, it was a call to action. The darkness was real, and it was growing, but so was the light, and the light had the power to drive back the darkness. It wasn't some grand, sweeping change that would happen overnight. It was the small, everyday choices we make, the moments when we choose love over hate, understanding over judgment, unity over division. I realized that the light wasn't just out there, somewhere in the distance. It was here, inside each of us. Every act of kindness, every moment of compassion, every hand extended in friendship was a part of that light. And as we chose to be that light, the darkness would have less power, less hold on the world. But I also saw that the darkness could easily take over if we let it. The fear and division were like seeds, and if we allowed them to grow unchecked, they would consume everything. I saw how easily it was for people to slip into hatred, to retreat into their own fears and prejudices, to believe that their side was the only side that mattered. And I could feel the weight of that fear, how it separated us, how it pushed us further and further apart. But then I also saw the power of choice, the choice to act differently, to speak differently, to think differently. I saw how small acts of kindness could break down walls, how compassion could bridge divides, how understanding could heal wounds. I was shaken by the vision. I still am. It's hard to look at the world the same way after seeing something like that. The darkness is real. It's in the news, in our politics, in our relationships, in the way we treat each other. But so is the light. And the light is stronger if we choose it. The question is, which path will we walk? Will we give in to the fear, to the division, to the darkness? Or will we choose the light, even when it's hard, even when it feels like we're standing alone? The choice is ours. It always has been. And I believe that if we choose the light, if we choose unity, if we choose love, we can push back the darkness. It's not going to happen overnight, but it will happen, one person at a time, one choice at a time. Just as the vision revealed the power of unity and the impact of our collective choices, it was in this quiet, personal moment that I truly understood how even the smallest acts of kindness and faith can ripple out, creating a wave of change that no darkness can resist. I never fully understood the power of small acts until the moment I truly saw their impact. It was like a sudden shift in perspective, where everything I thought I knew about changing the world felt insignificant compared to what I was witnessing. I was in the midst of a quiet, everyday moment, nothing extraordinary about it at first. But then, as I looked around, I realized something profound. There was a deep weight in the air, like the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to change. That's when I heard his voice. It wasn't loud or commanding, but soft, like a whisper that carried all the wisdom of ages. "John," he said, and I could feel the warmth of his presence wrap around me. "Do not underestimate the power of the smallest act of faith, of kindness. These moments, these choices, they are what change the course of history." At first, I was confused. How could something as simple as holding a door open or offering a smile possibly shift the trajectory of the world? How could these small gestures make any difference in a world so full of noise, so full of chaos and division? But as he spoke, the realization began to sink in. Jesus continued, "The world may seem consumed by darkness, by fear and hatred, but even the smallest light can push it back. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, ripples out and touches lives in ways you cannot even see. It is not the grand gestures that matter the most, but the quiet moments where you choose to act in love, in faith, and in grace. These are the moments that change everything." I began to see it more clearly. The little things, the things we often overlook. are the foundation of the world we're building. It's in the way we speak to each other, in the way we show patience to a stranger, in the way we help someone without expecting anything in return. These are the acts that, when multiplied, form the strength of a movement that can change hearts and, in turn, change the course of history. I saw how easy it is to get lost in the noise of the world, to think that only the big events, the loud voices, can make a difference. But Jesus was showing me that it's the small things that truly matter. A gentle word to someone struggling, a simple act of kindness to someone who feels invisible. It's these moments that build the foundation for love. And love is what pushes back the darkness. The darkness of fear, division, and hatred can seem overwhelming at times. But Jesus reminded me that light, true light, always begins in the smallest places. And when enough people share that light, it can illuminate the world in ways we can't even imagine. So I realized then that I didn't have to wait for the world to change. I could be part of that change, starting with my own actions, my own choices. Each small act of kindness, each step of faith, was a part of the greater light that was pushing the darkness away. And as I lay there in the hospital room, still processing the profound realization of his words, I began to understand the true meaning of the second chance I had been given. I slowly opened my eyes, but the world was blurry at first, like waking from a deep sleep where nothing made sense. My head was pounding, my body sore, and I felt a cold rush of fear take hold of me. But as I tried to move, I felt something soft beneath me. Hospital sheets, I realized. And then I heard voices. Familiar voices. My family. My heart skipped a beat as the haze began to clear. I was alive. I hadn't expected this. I had been sure I wouldn't make it, sure that the accident had taken me for good. But here I was, in a hospital room, surrounded by the people I loved most. My parents, my siblings, my closest friends, all of them standing by my side, faces full of concern and relief. It was like I had been given another chance, a second chance at life, one I hadn't expected to get. And in that moment, it hit me. I was meant to be here for a reason. As I lay there, trying to process everything, a calm settled over me. I didn't know how long I had been out or what had happened after the accident, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I had a message to share. A message that wasn't just for me anymore, but for everyone around me. I couldn't help but feel a sense of purpose rising inside me, something I hadn't felt so strongly before. This was my second chance, my opportunity to make a difference, to do what I hadn't done before. I looked around the room, meeting the eyes of my family, and they smiled at me, their faces a mix of joy and relief. I could see their love, their support, but I could also see something else. A quiet, unspoken question. What would I do with this second chance? What was I meant to do now that I had been given more time? The answer wasn't fully clear, but I knew deep down that it had to be something meaningful. Jesus had shown me something, had given me a glimpse of what was at stake, and now I had to carry that knowledge forward. I had been given another shot, not just to live, but to speak, to share what I had learned, to help others understand the importance of love, of unity, of faith. The darkness that had tried to consume me didn't have the final word. I had been brought back for a reason, perhaps to shine a light in places where it had gone dim, to remind others of the beauty of small moments, of simple acts of kindness, of connection. I wasn't sure how it would all unfold, but I knew that I couldn't waste this second chance. I had been given more time, more breath, more opportunities to be a voice for something greater than myself, and I couldn't let it slip away. And in that moment, I suddenly realized that life wasn't just about surviving, but about the reason why I was given this second chance. I stood in front of my community, my heart pounding with anticipation. For so long, I had kept my story to myself, too afraid to speak, too unsure of how it would be received. But now, something inside me had changed. I had been given a second chance, an opportunity to share what I had learned, to tell others about the power of faith, love, and integrity. These weren't just words to me anymore. They were truths I had come to understand with every fiber of my being. I began to speak, slowly at first, my voice trembling. But as I looked out at the faces in front of me, my neighbors, my friends, the people I had grown up with, I found strength in their eyes. I told them about the darkness I had seen, the fear and division that were creeping into every corner of our world. But I also told them about the light, about how even the smallest act of kindness, even the quietest act of faith, could push that darkness back. How love, real love, is what binds us together and helps us rise above the fear. As I spoke, I urged them to act with integrity, to live by the values that truly matter: honesty, compassion, and respect. In a world so full of noise and division, it was easy to lose sight of those things. But I knew, deep in my soul, that if we all chose to live with integrity, we could overcome anything. Together, we could shine brighter than the darkness that threatened to consume us. I wasn't just speaking to them, I was speaking to myself, reminding us all of the power we hold to change the world, one small act at a time. But despite the doubt in the air, I pressed on, determined not to let skepticism silence the message that burned inside me. I knew that change didn't come from waiting. It came from doing, from speaking out, and from believing in the power of our collective efforts. I could feel the skepticism in the air as I spoke, those raised eyebrows, the quiet murmurs. I knew it wasn't easy to believe in something that seemed so simple, so small in the face of all the chaos in the world. But I couldn't let that stop me. I knew what I had to say mattered, even if it felt like no one was listening. The darkness we were all facing wasn't going to go away on its own. It was up to us to make a difference, no matter how small those changes might seem. So, I kept going. I kept speaking about the power of hope and responsibility, about the importance of supporting one another, even when it felt like the world was pulling us apart. I urged people to look beyond the headlines, beyond the noise, and see that we had the power to change things, one step at a time. It wasn't about grand gestures or sweeping changes. It was about the little things we did every day. A smile to a stranger, a moment of patience in a world that was growing impatient, a choice to help, even when it seemed like no one would notice. I could see the doubt in some of their eyes, but I refused to give up. Because even if I couldn't change everything all at once, I knew I could make a difference in my corner of the world. I believed in the ripple effect of small actions, the way one person's choice to act with kindness could spark a chain reaction. I wasn't going to stop spreading that message, no matter how skeptical they seemed, because I knew that if enough of us started making small changes, we could start shifting the course of things. We could start building the kind of world we all deserve. Thank you for listening to my story today. I hope that the message of hope, love, and change through small actions can touch the heart of each one of us. God has given us opportunities to make a difference in the world, and I believe that if we act together, even in small ways, we will create an impact. If you find this message meaningful and want to spread it to more people, please remember to hit like, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with your loved ones. Don't forget to leave a comment below the video. so I can hear your thoughts and feelings. Every comment, every share brings hope and light to those who need it. God always loves us and blesses those who live with love and patience. I pray that everyone will receive the peace and happiness that God wants to give us. Keep following the channel for more inspirational and encouraging messages on the journey to a better life. May you always be protected and blessed by God.